Well, welcome to I think it's week 7, Virtual Cafe. So this week we have Simon Skidmore with us from the JMS agency. Simon's a founder of the agency. It's only, I suppose it's quite new, Simon, isn't it? It's probably around 12 months.
Yeah, so after, sort of, I suppose, winding up the One Partners business, I set up JMS about a year ago. And so it's been going about a year, which is it's great. But it's a new model for basically a...
And it's set up as a virtual digital
digital offering, yeah, absolutely, which obviously works quite well in the current environment and has been going well.
Okay. Well, look, I'll hand over to you. So if you want to share your...
I'll just quickly share my screen with everyone.
And obviously, Simon's the topic today is around consumer experience, the consumer experience. Yes, we can see that, Simon.
Right, you can see that okay?
Yep, that's all good.
Right, so thanks to everybody for joining. I'm going to cover today a brand activation that I was involved with some time ago for Subaru's sponsorship of Mount Perisher in the Kosciuszko National Park down in New South Wales. Before I get into that, so just sort of quickly covering my background and where I come from. So I started my advertising career at Saatchi & Saatchi in London, which was a great place to start and an amazing experience. And I was lucky enough to get sent over to run the British Airways business at the Sydney office for a period of time. And of course, having spent a little bit of time in Sydney, I wasn't going back. So I spent 3 years at the Sydney office. I then joined into Public Group, which owns the McCann agency business and Momentum worldwide. So I did a stint at both of those agencies. And then in 2005, I set up the brand experience agency One Partners, which at the time was, experiential marketing was quite new at the time. And certainly we led the way in that space for a long time. But with changing times, it was time to change business models. And so last year, I set up the JMS agency, which John's already alluded to, is a sort of digital hub, virtual hub, which specialises in looking at clients' ecosystems and making sure they're all digitally fit for purpose going forward. So that's a bit of blurb on me. Today, what I'm going to cover off is really, I'm going to talk through the brief that we got, have a look at some of the insights that we uncovered to deliver the ideas. We presented quite a few concepts. I'm going to share all of the concepts, but not all of them got the tick of approval. Not all of them got approved, and that was for a number of reasons, and I'll talk you through that. I'm going to cover logistics. I think that's a really important area for agencies, particularly. A lot come unstuck there. They present great ideas, but haven't thought about whether they can deliver them and whether they can deliver them on budget. So I'll talk to that point. And then I've got some, pictures of how we brought the campaign. I've tried to keep it really visual, how we brought the campaign to life, and some of the learnings out of that, and also some reporting and results that came through that. So just a bit of background on the Subaru brand for those of you who aren't aware, and I know you're working on a brief for Suzuki. So different brand, but they've been in Australia since '73, and their whole positioning is all around do more, bringing friends and family together to I suppose live the moment and discover more. And just to sort of bring that to life, I thought we'd just watch a quick video just to sort of bring the brand itself to life.
Aussies are doers. We get out and get amongst it. We're problem solvers. We rise to a challenge and get stuff done. We don't like to sit around, well, maybe a little bit. We squeeze every last bit out of every day. We've been a part of Australian families since 1973. Often, we're still part of the family, because a Subaru isn't just made of steel, glass, plastic and rubber. It's made of people. The people that help you choose the Subaru that's right for you. And the people that keep your Subaru running like new. We want to make every experience with us a great one. A great experience that leaves you smiling. Because buying and owning a Subaru should be as fun and rewarding as the cars themselves. And each and every one of us at Subaru is committed to making that happen, to getting it done. And that's exactly what we're going to do.
It's a nice, good feel brand. And knowing that they're working on a brief, I think it's always good to have a look at competitor activity just to, get their minds thinking about how other brands are targeting different audiences.
Yeah.
So then moving on to, the Subaru brand, our brief was, well, Subaru have basically been supporting or sponsoring Perisher Mountain Resort for a number of years. So Perisher Mountain Resort is actually the largest ski area in the Southern Hemisphere. It's located in the Kosciuszko National Park in New South Wales. So for those of you in New South Wales, you will know that area. And it has a lift capacity of about 50,000 visitors an hour. So it's a densely populated area in terms of lots of people coming in, and obviously an ideal opportunity for brands to message to consumers, the right consumers, and be quite targeted in a sort of closed environment, if you like. So looking at the brief, the insights and the concept. So our brief was to develop concepts and actually activate and leverage Subaru's sponsorship of their Perisher Mountain Resort across the winter season. So that's really, June to September, depending on the weather. This year it's quite a short season. And the focus was around the launch of the new Subaru Forester and then all their all-wheel drive models. So Forester, Outback, and then XV. And the idea was really to engage with existing Subaru owners, and then at the same time attracting new customers in. From a budgetary perspective, so we actually started with about a 250k budget, which then got pulled back to 100. So when we started the brief, we came back with quite a number of ideas that we then had to pare back because the budget got pulled back, and that was just a business thing that happened during the process, which quite often happens with agencies.
It's a heavy chop.
It's a heavy chop, but but not unusual. But anyway, look, 100k. I guess what this talks to is that you can still be really, really creative with not a huge amount of money and really engage people. So traditionally, up until the point that we were sort of brought on board, Subaru sponsorship had very much been, I suppose, traditional branding and banners and flags around the Perisher Resort. So what you're seeing on the screen now, there is a ski tube that runs right under Perisher and takes people to each part of Perisher Mountain. And these would have appeared in the ski tube, these banners, and then more traditional comms that you would see all around the resort, so flags and banners, which is great and important, but of course people are focused on their skiing and their boarding, and so you need other ways to really engage people, and that was what we wanted to do. We wanted to really try and bring this sponsorship to life in a new way that they hadn't done before. Target audience, so as I said earlier, existing Subaru owners and attracting new customers, but the focus was families, and families with the mindset who are much more active, adventurous, a passion for people, families that have a passion for the outdoors and obviously particularly the snow, because they wouldn't be there if they didn't have a passion for it. So with that in mind, when we started the consumer insights journey, we had to think about what are some of the things that really drive these families to go skiing? What's important to them? So So it's all about uncovering relevant insights that can help improve the Subaru family snow experience. They're already going, we know they're going to be there. How do we bring that to life and, you know, deliver an experience which connects Perisher and Subaru? So there are kind of 4 key areas, and those key areas really were to reward, was the first one, and that was all around when families go to the snow, it's a really expensive trip. So you've got your accommodation, your lift passes, lessons, equipment, hire, all that sort of stuff, food and drink, you know, and for example, a cup of coffee on the mountain costs you $7. So everything's double the price. Also on the mountain, there are very few, you know, cheap rest stops, places that you can actually stop and eat or have a quick bite. You're normally up for, you know, a family's normally up for $50, $100 minimum to go and have a bite to eat and something to drink. So it's an expensive exercise. So we thought if we could provide relevant rewards that help the dollar pay, that could go some way to supporting the experience. Convenience. So while families love going to the snow, it's not all fun. There are parts of it that are a real ordeal. And so particularly if you have young children and you've got to carry all their skis and all their boots and poles and gloves and hats and everything else, it can be quite stressful for families. So the thinking there was, how do we make it really easy for families to get from their car onto the snowfield? So sometimes you might have to walk 100 meters from the car to get to the ski lift, or get to the place where you buy your ticket to get on the mountain. And that for families can be quite stressful, and not the best start to the day, as you can imagine. So how do we find ways to bring that, make that easier for families? Resourcefulness. So with obviously being on the mountain, the weather conditions change rapidly all the time. So it can be freezing cold 1 minute and very hot and warm the next. So we were looking at items that we could provide that make their day a little better in terms of providing them gift packs. And then finally was all about the, you know, how do we entertain them as part of it? So deliver added value experiences at the snow while they're on the mountain. So there were the kind of 4 insights that we looked at. And from there, what we did is we kind of, sorry, let's just.
I've experienced all those.
Yeah. You've experienced all those? Good, yeah. There you go. So from there, we kind of honed in on 2 areas, I suppose. So we presented concepts that covered all areas, but we honed in on those 2. And in terms of our approach, it was really 3 key elements. So it was to surprise and delight by rewarding customers, improve the journey families take every day to get onto the snow, so remove the struggle, and then improve or enhance the overall ski experience while they're there. So have a bit, you know, so how they could have a bit more fun. And again, we tended to, in terms of honing on those 2 areas in terms of the concepts that eventually went live. So I'll take you through the concepts. There's, I think, 7 in total, and all quite different. So the first one is called the Subarista. And this was all about surprising and delighting Subaru owners at the snow. Essentially, it's a pop-up coffee and hot chocolate pit stop. And the idea was to put a professional coffee machine into the back of the new Subaru Forester, take it to the top of the mountain and serve complimentary coffee and hot chocolate to Subaru owners and potentially new customers as well at the top of Perisher Mountain. And around that, we would have branding, we'd have branded chairs, we'd have fencing, banners, a fire pit, all that sort of stuff. So it came a bit of a pit stop, somewhere you could go for 10, 15 minutes, grab your coffee, sit down, have a bit of break, and then go off. Because that's what a lot of people want to do. They don't want to have to take all their gear off, go inside, sit down for an hour, because then you never feel like getting back out in the snow again. You want to do a quick pit stop and off you go again. And those of you who've skied before, been lucky enough to ski before, will know exactly what I'm talking about. So there were kind of three elements to it. So there was the pit stop, the complimentary coffee and hot chocolate, as I've said. The idea was that we send out SMS alerts via the Perisher Epic Pass. So if you're on the mountain, you have a pass, and everyone who gets a pass, or Perisher have their mobile number. So they were able to send out SMS alerts in the morning and the afternoon to let customers know that the coffee was free and available at that time. And then what we also did as a third element was to encourage social sharing. We encouraged visitors to take pictures and then Instagram those, hashtag them while they were actually in the pit stop area. So that was the kind of the core elements of the campaign. Concept 2 was really a thank you. It was a gift pack. It was like, well, you know, families, there are lots of things that you need and quite often forget when you're out the snow. So you need lip balm because your lips get chapped really quickly. You need sunscreen because it's very hot sometimes. You need tissues because your nose is running. You need ski grips and things like that. So it was all about putting a really small little pack together that you could either put in your jacket pocket or put in your backpack, and you could carry it around the mountain with you, and it wasn't something too heavy. So that was a nice little second concept that we could almost combine with a bigger idea. Concept 3 was the Subaru Crew, and this ties back to the insight around families getting their kids from the car to the base of the mountain, if you like. As I said, sometimes it can be quite an ordeal just carrying all the stuff. The idea here is that we had branded ambassadors walking along, and as soon as the Subaru pulled into the car park, they would walk over and ask if they, could effectively be their concierge service. So most people would be quite happy for someone to come along and take all their gear with them. And nicely branded, again, really engaging, because no one's going to say no to this. Everyone's going to be, of course, we'd love to do that. And if you're not a Subaru owner, you'd be going, why am I not getting that service? So it was a really nice way of bringing that to life. Concept 4, a little bit more risque, I have to say. We did present this to the client because we wanted to share our thinking. However, we were honest about our research, and we do that with every concept that we present. So effectively, this was Subi, but we called it Subi bowling. But it was, you could get inside one of these Zorbs and bowl down these Subaru, and we would do it in a confined area, in a very controlled area, and all that sort of stuff. But our research had showed that there was a terrible accident in Russia where someone had rolled one of these Zorbs off the edge of a cliff at a ski resort. So we kind of went, you know what, I think we'll share the idea, but we're not recommending that we go ahead and do this one because...
only in Russia.
Exactly. There's no OH&S over there. So... But a nice idea, and this was all about bringing some fun and having a bit of family fun, doing more. Concept 5 was quite different again. So this was all about using technology, so geofencing, and we were going to bury a virtual Subaru Forester, the new Forester, somewhere on the mountain. And the idea here was that we geofence the whole area. And basically participants have to go around using their phone to locate the virtual Forester, and you just Shazam. Shazam doesn't actually exist anymore in terms of from a promotional sense, but at the time you could Shazam certain areas that were branded that would give you clues as to where the car had been buried on the mountain. And once you found it, once you located it, you automatically went in the draw to win instant prizes. So you might win a free ski pass for the day, something like that for the family. So quite decent prizes. So again, it was adding quite a bit of value, and it was really relevant, but it was a way of engaging with the brand on a much deeper level. And the final idea was around engaging with Subaru influencers or ambassadors. So this was all about delivering amplification on a much broader scale. So while our brief was very much to bring to bring an activation to life within Perisher Resort, we initially said, well, look, there's, at the time when the budget was a bit bigger, we feel there's an opportunity to actually take this much broader than Perisher and actually amplify this through social channels outside of Perisher to everyone around the country, anyone who's interested in skiing. So it was all about creating video content, recruiting a high-profile influencer, an Aussie skier or boarder, obviously with a strong social following on Instagram and Facebook, just purely to gain greater reach and amplification through social media. The concept that we attached with that was, it was the do more, basically do more of the Perisher backcountry with Subaru. So we basically follow an Aussie snow champion in a fully equipped Subaru as they explore the Perisher mountain and the backcountry. A legend on the mountain, watch the Subaru take our ambassador off the beaten track and out of their comfort zone as they find hidden chutes and runs and do new tricks. So it was really about getting an ambassador in the car, taking them off the beaten track and filming all this content and then pushing that content out on social media around the activation. So we suggested a couple of ambassadors. So Scotty James, Olympian, he's bronze medalist snowboarder. Probably the most well-known Tora Bright, who's an Olympic gold and silver medalist snowboarder. And also Russell Henshaw, so who's a freestyle skier. So they were the three ambassadors that we suggested as part of that. And this actually got to stage 2 and stage 3 until the budget got cut. So we were quite a way down the track on this one, and then had to pull the budget, which was a bit of a shame because that would have been really nice to see that content come to life.
You could have just used a cutout, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. So really, really cheap cutout. So the concepts that actually got approved were probably no surprise. The Subarista, that really warmed the hearts, and the idea of a complimentary coffee in the sense of, well, you know, a family to buy 4 drinks on the mountain is about $28. So if you're giving them a free experience, and that's to Subaru owners, then and also potential customers, it was seen as a real value add, and also it was just you know, something they'd never done before and something they really liked the idea of doing.
Sorry, Simon, it'd be quite surprising to see a car up there too, you know, like in that location.
Well, they had actually taken cars up onto the mountain previously, but they just left them on platforms, and the car was just there, quite often covered in snow. So you know, it was, but the people weren't engaging. It was sort of a bit, you know, it was like a billboard, I suppose. It was like a live billboard. They weren't really engaging with the product, and this was about engaging with the product. I mean, and I'll get to that and talk to that, because people really did, you know, really take a lot of interest in the car, which was the whole purpose of this. The second thing was, added on top of that, they really liked the idea of the complimentary snow packs, and they happened to have boxes and boxes in their office of windscreen ice scrapers and branded blankets. So we said, fantastic, we'll swap those out and use those to give away as complimentary gifts to Subaru owners only. So while everybody got the coffee, you only got the branded blanket and the windscreen ice scrapers if you were a Subaru customer, and you had to show your key to get that. your Subaru key. So now getting into some of the logistics, because as you can imagine, working in this sort of environment, it can be quite challenging. So if you've been skiing before, you'll have seen this this is a ski map of Perisher Mountain, and what I've done here is just highlighted the key areas. So there's about 3 major areas on the mountain, and we had wanted to activate at the front valley on Perisher, which is right in the middle there. And the reason we wanted to activate there is because it's where you've got the largest footfall. The most people travel through that area during their time on the mountain. So it was all about getting touching as many people as possible. The reality was we ended up at Blue Cow, which was great because we could say, we were serving coffee at the highest point on the mountain. But of course, it was in a different location. So some of the advantages of being up on the top at Blue Cow was Blue Cow is fully owned by the Perisher Resort. So it enabled us to serve free coffee and hot chocolate, which we couldn't do down in the valley because there were some independent merchants there who would have been serving cafes, who would have been serving coffee, and they wouldn't have allowed us to do the complimentary stuff. So that really kind of forced our hand. Blue Cow, we had a much larger activation area, and it was flat, and we had a concrete slab to work on. Also, we had a lot of traffic. People came up on the ski tube all the time because it was the highest point, but also there was a big restaurant up there, which we had a lot of people visiting. Some of the downsides were that it was, as you can imagine, susceptible to really strong winds and poor visibility at times. So there was a lot of work we had to do around contingency planning, as you can imagine. There was still a lot of traffic up at Blue Cow in terms of people, but it tended to be more intermediate and advanced skiers. A lot of the beginners they hung around in Perisher Valley. So they weren't up the top of the mountain for obvious reasons. Also, just little things like the distance between the terminal and our activation area was about 50 meters. So that isn't far, but when you've got a meter of snow on the ground and you've got to walk through that, it was troublesome for our staff. So we again had to think about how that was going to be managed on a day-to-day basis, depending on the conditions. Some of the other challenges, well, because we were at the top of the mountain, how on earth were we going to make coffee at 1900 meters? Outside, can that actually happen? And obviously we had to speak to some technicians prior to work all this out. We had to locate a coffee machine that we could fit and operate out of the back of the new Subaru Forester. So there was a bit of work to be done there. We had to get the coffee machine into the back of the car because it was so heavy. And then once that was in the car, we had to get the car to the base of the mountain. And then we had to get the car to the top of the mountain during the middle of winter. Now, normally when cars go up the mountain, they go at the start of the season when the fields are still green, and they put them up there and they leave them there for the whole season. We were going to the top of the mountain, and we were going up with snow. So there were about 4 snow plows towing this Subaru up the mountain. Had to be done at the appropriate time and everything because there were people skiing. But that in itself was a logistical nightmare, as you can imagine. And we had to work very closely with Perisher and also New South Wales National Parks to get all that approved. The other thing was employing baristas. Now, you'd think that wouldn't be an issue. Well, because we were activating over 4 weekends, most of the local baristas were employed full-time working in the cafes, either in Jindabyne or at Perisher or other resorts. So that was a bit of a challenge, finding that people who could work in the environments we were talking about. Things like 3-phase power and generators. Is a generator going to work at altitude? And again, as I've said, working making sure that we're following all the national park processes and protocols and parish resort protocols. Contingency planning we had going on a daily basis, so we knew when the winds were going to change, when it was going to be, we were going to get a heavy snowfall in. We had to make a call the day before. We were going to cancel the activity and move it to the following day or the following weekend. We also only got really 2.5 months to pull this together because we were briefed quite late, so it was quite a kind of, right, how do we get this? We need to do something, we want to do it. How do we make this happen in a short period of time? And then just things like, storing a coffee machine in the back of a car seems quite simple, but when it was -5 most nights, we had to actually heat the inside of the car to make sure the pipes on the coffee machine didn't freeze up at night, so that in the morning we were able to still serve coffee as normal without having to defrost the whole system. So there was what I'd probably say this is probably one of the most logistical campaigns I've ever had to work on. But really, really interesting, learnt a lot, and it was a really fascinating campaign. So the activation itself, when it came to life, so we had, and this is when the sun was shining, so we had obviously the new beautiful blue Subaru Forester parked in prime position with branding all around it. So it really marked out the spot where the activation area was. We had the car, we had the fencing, we had banners, flags, we had branded chairs. We had 2 baristas, a staff member, and then all the coffee supplies and everything had to be brought up every day and operated out of the back of the Forester. It was a 4-weekend campaign, so we did 4 weekends, Saturday and Sunday, so 8 days of activity from about 10 till 2, weather dependent obviously. Now we had previously, because we were targeting families, we had previously recommended that we do it during school holidays, which makes obviously absolute sense. But unfortunately, because we didn't have access to the car until the 3rd week of August, we had to start the campaign, the activity late. So it prevented us hitting our key peak period for families in early July. So here's our wonderful one of our brand ambassadors in the blue jackets, branded jackets, and they were specced up on the car as well. So they actually had quite a lot of knowledge. They were briefed on quite a lot of knowledge around the car in terms of the specifications and the costs and all that sort of stuff, even though we did have a Subaru person present for one activation. And then you can see out the back there, you can't see obviously the coffee machine, but that for the people standing in the queue there, they could see it all happening out of the back. The coffee machine was in the back of the Subaru there, and our baristas working away. And this area here was quite large. So you can see we had a big area to work with. We were getting through about 450 coffees in a morning session. So it got quite busy. And
did you have to set all those chairs up in 2
Yep. Yeah, our team every day, they had to get up, move all that stuff, because you couldn't leave it there overnight because it would just blow away in the wind. So you had to bring it all out, set it all up. And we had it set up in a certain way that we wanted it. And then, of course, people come along and moved everything around, which was absolutely fine. If a family of 4 was turning up, they'd just come and grab the chairs and pull them together. But it became a really, the word of mouth got out there. And obviously with the SMS alerts, people just started appearing, going, oh, we heard about the coffee, we've come up. And what was really interesting is that people were constantly saying, can I sit in the car? Tell me a bit about the car? Can you, and particularly for there were a lot of Subaru Forester owners who were, really interested in upgrading as well. So we got a lot of interest in the car. And as you can see, it got very busy at times. The staff were full on knocking out coffees all the time. And so we had the 2 baristas here, and then we had a brand ambassador who was kind of there roaming there to sort of give more to talk about the product and the car itself. You can see how it came together. So you can see how the weather's changed here, and it's a little bit more icy. Everyone's cold, and just, you know, lots of different triggers. But the thing was that if you were anywhere in the vicinity, it was the place to go. Everyone could see, and they were just, it became a zone and a pit stop, which is exactly what we intended to be. It became a place to hang out. So some of the learnings. So look, I think, you know, the signage and the fencing and the branding worked really well and encouraged visitors to come over and find out more. That really worked well. The flags really helped mark out the activation zone in terms of people could see the branding and know there was something going on, so they would come over. If they hadn't got one, the alerts, people were just kind of heading in that direction to see what was going on. Because they hadn't seen anything like this happen at that point on the mountain before. So the branded merchandise, so we were communicating that, you know, for Subaru owners, we were providing scrapers and blankets. So those went like hotcakes. Everybody was coming up and showing their Subaru key and taking those away. And we had lots of people who weren't Subaru owners who were obviously coming up and getting their coffee and could see people walking away with these branded items, and feeling quite envious. But you know, everything was branded. The brand ambassador jackets, the chairs, everything was branded overall. So it was really, really, really strong visibility. So some of the challenges, I suppose, and considerations were the branded fencing was great. Looked fantastic, but of course, as soon as the wind came through, it constantly needed to be, you know, we were hammering it back into the ground because it was getting pulled out by the wind. We probably would do a marquee for the non-windy days, just to protect people from the sun, because sometimes it gets really, really hot with the sun coming down and reflecting off the white snow. And we also had recommended this to client, but it didn't happen again, but more budgetary issues and probably lack of signage. We suggested having additional signage around the resort in other areas, directing people to the top of the mountain. And then obviously the content opportunity that we talked about at the start, the amplification of having an ambassador, we felt would have added a much broader layer to this, not only for Perisher itself, but outside of the resort. Just quickly here, so some more sort of logistics. So we ended up using a barista team out of Sydney, who were not only brilliant technicians, brilliant barista makers, but they were also passionate skiers. So they were quite happy to come down to Perisher every weekend for, you know, effectively 4 weeks, and basically it was important to do that because you needed consistency in terms of someone who knew how everything was set up and operating, somebody who knew how to work within the protocols of the environment, and also you know, work the equipment. If there were any challenges or problems, they were able to fix it pretty quickly. We had some amazing quotes. So lots of people were saying, if I buy a new Subaru Forester, will I get a coffee machine in the back? That one was a big one. It kept coming back all the time. And then in terms of you know, just the results and a bit of wrapping up, I suppose the activation proves really successful, and I don't think it was a surprise to us. I think, you know, we knew because of that insight that if we were helping with the dollar pain on the mountain, i.e. we're going to give you all of coffees and hot chocolate, we knew that would bring people in, and it worked really well. We got a lot of people coming through and a lot of positive feedback, and a lot of people talking about the car and, you know, walking away talking about Subaru providing this great experience. Some of the top line numbers, well, we basically kind of tracked it across 3 areas. So about 450 coffees a day went out and hot chocolates. We had SMS alerts, as I said, going out. So there's about 500 went out twice a day. And then we did some visitor tracking. So we had a tracking system that actually monitored movement across the activation area. So when you combine all those, we had about 34,000 brand engagements and impacts. And obviously that was just potentially people seeing it, but then there were lots of conversations and further engagement with our staff on site as well. So that was seen as a pretty good result, particularly given the amount of time we had to turn it around and the budget that we ended up working with. So that's the Subarista activation for Mount Perisher.
And how much of the budget was left over?
I have to say, I think we put in a lot more hours than we actually got paid for. But look, it was a great experience, and I think it was really it really took their sponsorship activation to the next level.
Yeah, I mean that's like, for that sort of money, that's an amazing. You know, they got a fair bit out of that.
They did, and I think, you know, what it shows you is that you know, it's outside of your traditional channels, which, you know, obviously it's wonderful if you've got the money to spend there, but if you don't have that money, there's other amazing ways that you can bring a brand to life and engage consumers. As long as you've got a strong insight and it's relevant, you can deliver these activations for sure.
Yep. Okay.
Any questions? Or did I cover everything?
Well, I've got a question or two, but I was just wondering if students have...
do you want to stop sharing your screen, maybe, Simon?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you. That's great. Sometimes the students if they've got a question, sometimes they put them into the chat.
Right, okay.
There's a few students online, so now's a really good opportunity to ask any questions if you have got any.
Well, whilst they're thinking, I'll ask my question. That's really interesting activation, Simon, and thank you for demonstrating an activation for a motor vehicle manufacturer. It's particularly pertinent to the students, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if John's given you much information on the Suzuki challenge that they had, but it's brand related.
Yeah, I read the brief actually, yeah.
So, and obviously, except Queensland, I think, and northeast New South Wales or something, Queensland have their own world up there.
Yeah.
Their own, you know, they're controlling their own Suzuki world.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is this: is that so, you know, Deloitte has the key creative account.
Yeah.
So, in terms of working with activation, do you think it would be essential to work alongside a brand campaign, or not? Because clearly it's pinpointed to a sponsorship, if you know what I mean, a time with in this case, a ski resort.
Yeah.
But do you think that's important so that it lifts, leverages that brand, if you know what I mean, or that campaign? Or do you think that it's important to be separate?
Undoubtedly, if you can align your activity, I think if you look at research, it will always show that if you always get a much more uplift if you combine your activities. Now, ideally, there is some consistency of message throughout, but absolutely, I think it will always be a benefit if you can run them in parallel. Having said that, I've worked on many campaigns where we've done activations independently of the brand campaign and still had very successful results. So I think it comes down to, the brief and also the budget and what's achievable, all the factors that you have to take into account with any brief. But definitely, I think that's, yeah.
I think also given that particular industry, motor vehicles, I think if you can add something like that into, what you're, into the brand campaign that you're building, the clients love that. They get so excited about those things because it's the touch points, isn't it, Simon?
Yeah.
It's where you get the opportunity to touch the actual car or to experience it, get inside it. Like you said, a lot of the people want to get inside the car or sit inside it or look inside it or all those things. So.
Yeah, look, I love activations. I love sort of experiential sort of based actions or activities. The issue is on a brand campaign, and which is in theory national in scale.
Yeah.
There's a national media budget, if you know what I mean, which runs into millions of dollars. Yeah. And then there's the creative budget. So it's a very traditional view of it. But Deloitte, and I don't know if John's told you this, but Deloitte's view, and certainly the client's view, is everything's on the table.
Yeah.
And I think they just really want students to think laterally. So certainly to my students, I'll be saying, well, what about an activation? Come on, guys. Yeah. And this is, I think, an excellent demonstration of what you can do. So thank you.
Yeah.
I think we've got a student question too, by the way, in the chat.
Oh, yeah. So it's from Monica. So how do you think brand activation experiences will be affected by COVID?
Well, look, I think obviously a good question, and particularly pertinent, now, and obviously for Victoria at the moment, that's a real challenge. Look, I think you have to plan around the environment that we're in. That said, I think what I showed you today, I think, was very much what I'd call a traditional experiential activation, because the component that we wanted to add, i.e. the content piece, didn't actually get to happen. So because, for budgetary reasons. So what we would normally do is we would normally have a digital element to a campaign like that. So there would be some driver. And if you look at the concepts that were presented, there would be some digital element that you could do online. So you don't necessarily have to be in the space, in the environment, to get it to engage with the brand. And that that can happen in many different ways. But more and more with experiential and brand activation activities, you'll find that there will be a seamless approach to it, both online and offline. So what we don't get caught out in this situation when COVID comes along, that everything gets cancelled because we can't do an activation outdoors. Suddenly we have to deliver that activation, online, and it's possible. It is possible to do it. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point and really well said, Simon. I think everyone's thinking, particularly Suzuki and Deloitte, that this campaign, or the challenge the students have got, which is mid next year essentially, that we're going to be in a better space.
Yeah, and
we're all crossing our fingers.
Yeah.
And we've got that. We've got University of Queensland doing some great research to help us through this. So let's hope we have a vaccine or something, and it's a better space, because I think that in terms of activations, I think they're wonderful. And I think that, because salience is particularly important in this campaign for Suzuki, lifting that, this is the sort of activity I think which would work very well. The issue is how to do it nationally, because, you know what I mean? Is it something that you only do where there's a bigger number of people, so in a city, or do you place it in a mountain like what you've done?
So to that point, and obviously for this particular brief we couldn't do that because it was specifically for Perisher Ski Resort. But what we have done is lots of activity where we roadshow it around the country, and I could share hundreds of other case studies where we've done that, and we might start up in North Queensland and come all the way down to Victoria and roadshow in different states. But as I said, more and more to be more cost effective as well, because it is expensive to do those. It can be expensive to do those activities, even though we know they work really well. What we're seeing is, for example, you might run an activity like that goes across 3 or 4 states, and then you're videoing the content of all the activity, and you turn that content into something that you push out through social media, and then that becomes a campaign in its own right. So it's the backstory almost. So there's lots of ways you can treat this and turn what is, you know, can be a small event, but make it feel like much bigger by amplifying it.
Yeah. I think you kind of answered there's a message, a question from Kate,
Yep.
but you've kind of just spoken about that. Do you consider similar activation events in other parts, or did you consider similar activation events in other parts of Australia?
Yeah.
And I would imagine.
Yeah. So normally we would absolutely do we would normally look at Eastern Seaboard as a minimum. So we'd normally always do Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne as a minimum. And then if we can go into regional areas as well, we would look at that. But it all comes back to the budget. And obviously, you know, there would be a physical component of that and a digital component of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask you one more question, unless students have got one other, because it's just something you talked about earlier. You talked about the idea of presenting the idea of using brand ambassadors, or
Yes.
And that fell aside because your budget got reduced.
Yeah.
I'd like your professional view on this, because brand ambassadors are struggling at the moment. Well,
Yeah.
and that's because of the pandemic, partly. But I'm just wondering how much value add, because clearly it got taken away in your budget.
Yeah.
So I assume that was a client decision, but how much value add do you see in that? You're as an executive of an agency. I'd be interested in your.
Well, I think, look, it will come down to the individual talent, the ambassador at the end of the day. The way we would look at it is, firstly, how much is that ambassador asking? And they can be expensive, depending on what we're asking them to do and how long we need them for. But the key thing is having a clear view on what you want them to do. So if you want them to appear in a content piece and you need them for a day or 2 days filming to do the content, and then you want them to make a number of appearances, they might want to do some online chat or something like that. If you factor all that in, it's about just then getting as much out of them as you can, and being really clear about what you want from them. The main thing is they have to be invested in the brand, and you very quickly after speaking to them, you get a sense of whether they're really just there for the money or whether they're really interested. The people I've worked with in the past are ones who are really almost chasing you. They want to be involved because they've got a real interest. So I think that's the way to approach it. Undoubtedly, you can spend a lot of money on ambassadors and get very little return. There's no doubt about it. And so it's a tricky one.
Yeah, no, thank you. The more I think of experiential activities, the more I can see the place for them or one or whatever. Yeah. And I love this idea of a journey, but it's just the cost, you know. And but the benefits, you know, it's really interesting to hear your opinion. Thank you.
But I suppose the other point there is that if you don't have an ambassador, how many people are going to actually engage in your Subaru content? It's like, why should I watch your content? Give me a reason to watch it. So if you're, as they are, sponsors of Perisher, if you're showing them this cool gold medalist driving a Forester through the snow, and then they get out and do some ski tricks, suddenly people are going to share that on social media. So you go, well, actually, you know, but if we can achieve that much amplification, then it's worth spending that money. Arguably, without them, we wouldn't get any amplification. Absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. It's been great being involved. And as I've said, you know, to John before, I'm always happy to help where I can.